Welcome to the extended version of this lesson on the aftermath. We just covered what the aftermath is, how it can build off the rest of your story, and a few common variations. Now, let's explore why the aftermath is so important, a secret to emphasize change, and then see this phase in action with an in-depth example of 1994's Leon the Professional. Let's start with why the aftermath matters. There are a few reasons. On top of what we already mentioned, the aftermath gives the audience a moment to catch their breath before the story ends. This is more important in movies or live productions as opposed to novels where the audience will usually stop and start because they've just sat through a blood-pumping story climax. Just like how the setup ramps up into the story, the aftermath ramps down out of it. It brings your audience back to a comfortable state. You want to slow down, not just slam on the brakes and send them flying through the windshield. It also gives the audience a chance to say goodbye to your characters. Just as the setup acts as an introduction, the aftermath acts as an outroduction. Remember, the setup and aftermath are the two phases outside the plot and outside of the journey. The setup lets us meet the characters in their ordinary world, and the aftermath usually lets us see them back in their ordinary world, though it may look a little different after their journey. An example of this is in Shrek, since we start in Shrek Swamp and end there, though with a lot more people around. This change in the environment actually relates to a fundamental part of stories. In the hero's journey, there is an idea of an elixir. You can think about this as a kind of magic that can change the world. In myth stories, a hero sets off, obtains some kind of elixir, and returns home to share this elixir and change the world. When we translate that idea to modern stories, you can think about it in two ways. First, the external reward from the goal could have some effect on the protag's environment. You can see this in Ready Player One, since protag Wade's reward is control of the oasis, and essentially unlimited wealth, which he uses to change his environment and the world as a whole. Here, there is usually some money or power involved, which can be considered the elixir, and the changes are very external. The other way you can think about it is that the internal change of embracing the need could have an effect on the protag and their community. You can see this in Shrek, since Shrek finally learns to break down his walls and let others in. And the aftermath shows all his new friends hanging out in his swamp. In this sense, you can look at the lesson the protag learned as the elixir, and it will often either strengthen their community or help enlighten others. Finally, let's look at a great technique you can use to highlight all of these changes in the protag's life. Remember how we mentioned way back in the setup the audience will measure your protag's change based on the difference between the setup and the aftermath? Well, the easiest way to highlight this change is to make these two phases as similar as possible. It seems counterintuitive, but by mirroring these phases, you can emphasize exactly what is different about them. A super clear example of this mirroring is in Love, Simon. The setup showcases Simon heading to school. He is curt with his family, awkward in the car, and picks up his three best friends. But when we get to the aftermath, Simon does the exact same routine, only with subtle differences. He is nice to his family, comfortable in the car, and picks up not only his three best friends, but his boyfriend as well. And by mirroring these two moments, we see exactly how Simon has changed throughout his journey, not only becoming comfortable with himself, but also being in a relationship. Now, let's see the aftermath in action with our in-depth example. Leon the Professional is a 1994 action drama that follows Leon, an assassin, and Matilda, a rebellious kid, as they team up to kill the killers of Matilda's family. This aftermath is perfect to explore because it not only covers a bunch of what we just talked about, but also showcases what to do if your protag dies in the story climax. To set things up, Leon begrudgingly takes in Matilda after her family is murdered by Antag Stan. She asks for help and he eventually agrees, training her to be an assassin. But when Matilda tries to kill Stan on her own, she is captured. Leon barely saves her and nearly escapes a full-scale attack, but is shot by Stan at the last minute in the story climax. Too bad for Stan, Leon has a bomb vest and kills Stan. Then we get the aftermath. Matilda no longer has Leon, and she tries to get the money he left for her, but the crooked accountant won't help her. So Matilda returns to the private school she abandoned in the setup and takes Leon's plant, which he had taken care of meticulously, and plants it outside. Though it doesn't seem like much, this aftermath does a lot. First, it mirrors the setup, since this is where Matilda abandoned her private school. So it makes sense to bring it back in this phase. This works because it helps highlight Matilda's change throughout the story. She started as a rebellious kid, but slowly turned into a regular 12-year-old who's ready to live in a safe environment. And though Leon is dead, we see his change from a stoic lone wolf to a guardian willing to sacrifice himself for Matilda. Second, it does exactly what an aftermath should do when a protag dies for a cause. We mentioned this in the last lesson, but we need to see the impact the protag's death left on the world. Here, we see his sacrifice has saved Matilda and put her in a safe environment. And this is honored as she plants his plant, which plays off of a speech Leon made earlier about spreading his roots. In a way, this plant becomes metaphorical of Leon and Matilda finally able to spread their roots. This isn't an award ceremony or celebration because this ending is still pretty somber. It's used to honor the fallen protag, similar to the aftermath in Saving Private Ryan. At the heart of both, there is an idea that the protag gave up their life to save the person showcased in the end. So this mourning and remembrance is represented by the flower in the aftermath symbol. It tells us the protag's sacrifice will not be forgotten. That brings us to the end of this extended lesson on the aftermath. You should now have a strong understanding of what the aftermath is, a few ways it can be used, and how to emphasize changes by mirroring it with the setup. And now that we've covered all 15 steps of universal story language, we'll spend the next lesson going over their symbols so you can easily remember them.